Okay, we're going to talk about the legislative branch or legislative body in the United Kingdom. The legislative body in the United Kingdom, the legislative power in the United Kingdom is held by Parliament. Parliament is a bicameral legislature. Obviously, the term bicameral refers to two houses. The power arrangement between the two houses is asymmetrical. What that means is that the houses themselves are not of equal power and prestige. In the United States, we would look at the House and the Senate as being of relatively equal power. So the bicameral Congress of the United States would be said to be symmetrical, whereas Parliament and many other countries, the legislative bodies between the two chambers in a bicameral legislature would be asymmetrical. The most powerful body in the UK Parliament is the House of Commons. The House of Commons is composed of 650 members, or who represent what are called 650, or who represent what are called constituencies. So there are 650 constituencies, what we would call districts in the United States. Voting in the House of Commons takes place by party line, so the majority party is virtually always assured of winning. They do have people that are called whips, and it's their job to make sure that members of each party are present to vote and that they actually vote the correct way. This gives rise to what is called the responsible party model. The idea of the responsible party model is that political parties have an obligation to deliver on their promises. So in the United Kingdom, voters choose typically from among Tory and Labour, and then if one of those parties wins, it's invited to form a government. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet will then write bills that will translate their party platform, or what's called in the United Kingdom their manifesto, into public policy. These bills will then be submitted to Parliament, and Parliament will vote to approve them. So when a voter in the UK votes, and then they see the result that the Tories won or that Labour won, they know exactly what is going to happen. Parties can guarantee that they will deliver on their promises. So when voters vote, they know, or in essence, they're voting for Plan A or Plan B. They're not necessarily voting for an individual. That individual isn't quite as important as the party. So it's almost like truth in advertising. So that does provide a great degree of accountability to voters. That's something that we don't really see in the United States. The other part of the UK Parliament is the House of Lords, and we've talked a little bit about it, how it's changed in recent years with the removal of the hereditary peers. Okay, the other house in the United Kingdom Parliament is the House of Lords. The House of Lords originally was composed of what were referred to as hereditary peers, and those individuals received their position in Lords by virtue of the fact that they were a member of the nobility. Over a period of time, Lords acquired what were referred to as life peers, and these individuals were appointed by various governments to serve in the House of Lords, but the position did not transfer to that person's child. Uh, Another thing with Lords is that they've essentially lost their power. Okay, today the power of Lords is mainly to delay legislation. They typically can only delay a bill for a short period of time. They really can't delay money bills. What Lords does is they like to think of themselves as refining legislation, but not really changing it in any great substantive way. There's this belief in democracy, and the Lords is the least democratic house of the two, so they defer to Commons on major policy areas. Another interesting thing that you might think about with Lords is that but because of the fact that these members don't have to be elected, they do have some political freedom to explore ideas and to represent viewpoints that may not be, we'll say, electorally viable. So the fact that the Lords is primarily now composed of these life peers, these unelected individuals, they can give expression to these somewhat unpopular views without having to suffer the electoral repercussions. An important part of the legislative process in the United Kingdom is a function or a concept called questions to the Prime Minister. And it is during this period that this time that the Prime Minister has to stand before Commons and take questions from both his party and opposition. And it's imperative that that the prime minister be able to defend his government's positions so that his government's not drawn into question, not drawn into disrepute, particularly as we approach the end of a 5-year cycle and a new election is going to be held. Parliament in the United Kingdom, particularly Commons, should be seen as a legitimization agent rather than policy making. Most all policy originates from the Prime Minister in Cabinet and then is legitimized by the Parliament. There's a pro forma debate and then there's a vote, and pretty much everybody knows the outcome of the vote. So Parliament serves as a way to check the power of the Prime Minister in Cabinet and also to legitimize or put the democratic seal of approval on the decisions that were already made. Executive. The United Kingdom has a single executive, or that is to say that it does not have two separate constitutionally mandated positions with separate executive power. Executive power is fused or set into one individual. That individual is referred to as the Prime Minister. Let's go ahead and delineate a difference between head of government and head of state. The Prime Minister is the head of government, or in the United States, we would probably use the term chief executive. This can be distinguished from the monarch as head of state. Typically, in a presidential system, you see a fusion between head of government and head of state into one individual. In a parliamentary system, these roles are split. Even if the society or the political system doesn't have a monarch, you often see in a parliamentary system the head of government, the person who actually runs the show, being the prime minister, and this elected president being a figurehead with limited governmental power. And in the United Kingdom, the head of government, the prime minister, runs the show, and the monarch, with incredibly limited power, is the head of state. So in a parliamentary system, we have this fusion of executive and legislative authority, and in a presidential system, the executive is separate from the legislature. Parliamentary systems, it's a lot more flexible. One of the advantages of a parliamentary system is you typically will never have divided government. Particularly if your system is using FPTP, you almost always have a majority party, and that party, the leader of the majority party in your legislative body, will then also become the chief executive. So it makes it a lot easier to get things done, and at least in my opinion, far more accountable to the voters, whereas in a presidential system, the prospect of divided government begins to manifest itself, particularly as an electoral system begins to de-align, and much more likely to produce divided government. And absolutely so if you have a multi-party system. Selection of the Prime Minister, as previously stated, comes from the majority party. The majority party will have its leader be invited by the monarch, as the saying is said, to form a government. If there is no majority party in Parliament, then what will happen is a coalition will be formed, and the leader of the largest party will typically be asked to be prime minister, and then the cabinet will be composed of both members of that largest party and minor parties that signed on with it to form the coalition. Okay, cabinet. I keep saying the term prime minister in cabinet, and that's truly the executive branch, and it definitely was so without a doubt prior to Margaret Thatcher. The prime minister was thought to be first among equals, and the other ministers in the cabinet were there to assist and to help develop the governmental programs and so forth. After Margaret Thatcher, we've seen a growth in the power and the preeminence of the prime minister, but still the cabinet has a role to play. Again, as previously stated, the cabinet serves as the policymaker, but the parliament serves as the legitimization agent of the policies that are made by the cabinet. An important concept with regard to the cabinet is called collective responsibility. And what that means is that everyone in the cabinet must publicly support all decisions that the government makes, and that they will collectively rise or fall based upon the success of the government. So there can be no external dissension. So while policies being formulated, they typically will debate different points of view, and I'm sure in private they might have their own opinion, but publicly they will always support the position of the government. Another thing to consider when thinking about the executive is the shadow government or shadow cabinet. This is the organization in the opposition party where you have the leader of the opposition serving as the shadow PM, and then various other individuals in the opposition party serving as shadow ministers. And it's their job to hold the government accountable by asking questions during question time and being able to provide alternative viewpoints and alternative positions. Should, in theory, a vote of no confidence occur and Parliament be dissolved and a new government be formed, this shadow cabinet, if they won, could become immediately the new government. They're already waiting there. They're ready in place to take over should the electoral winds change, or should a government lose re-election at the end of a 5-year cycle. So the Prime Minister is accountable to Parliament and accountable to his own party, and the process by which this happens is during the time period called Questions to the Prime Minister. Occasionally there might be what is called a backbencher revolt. And what that, first off, a backbencher is a junior member of the House of Commons. Seating in Commons is done by seniority, so senior members sit up front, junior members sit on the back. So these junior members, if they believe that their government, that their party is ignoring them, that the Prime Minister is ignoring them, they can stage a backbencher revolt, which means they begin to refuse to support the position of the government. This could lead to internal power struggles and perhaps a change in the PM. Prime Ministers can be replaced by the majority party, and this has happened before. For example, with Margaret Thatcher, her party, well, for lack of a better way to describe it, they essentially tapped her on the shoulder and said, you need to resign and step aside. We're going to put somebody else in place. And if you don't do it, it's going to get really ugly really quick. So she was replaced by a guy by the name of John Major, who was also a Tory. Okay, another way to hold the executive accountable is through what's called a vote of no confidence, or when they vote no on a motion of confidence. And what that does is it dissolves Parliament and calls for new elections. So that's a way to hold the government accountable. Bureaucracy. Vocab term Whitehall. That's a synonym that refers to the bureaucracy in the United Kingdom. It derives its name from the location where most bureaucratic buildings are. The bureaucracy in the United Kingdom, these individuals are professional, they are career civil servants, they are largely non-political. They have the joke is they have a plan in one file folder to nationalize an industry, and they also have a plan in another file folder to denationalize it. They pride themselves on being non-political and taking steps to implement the program and policies of the government that was democratically elected.